Stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble forward, do forward. The stumble forward, stumble forward. The stumble.
I'd like to welcome Ian Thornley to the Stumble Forward. Ian is the virtuoso singer, songwriter, and guitar player in Big Wreck and his solo band project Thornley. He's a multiple Juno Award nominee, but honestly, who needs awards when you are the quintessential archetypal rock star personified? Ian's music is a robust offering of big ideas, muscular musicianship, all executed with flawless technical acuity. He's also a Bruce Cockburn fan, which completes his legend status in my mind. Welcome, Ian Thornley.
Thanks.
Welcome, Ian.
It's quite an intro.
Honestly. I mean, I've been writing that intro for a week now.
Yeah, put that on a t-shirt for me.
It's all true, though. That's the crazy thing. Like, it's pretty true.
It's subjective.
I mean, maybe. I feel like, I've been studying record jackets and music and trying to understand what the mercurial makeup of what it is that attracts us more dominantly to some music than others. You just have a lot of it, Ian. Like, I've been excited / nervous to talk to you because I'm a huge fan, and I feel like, well, where do we even begin? I mean, I listened to a lot of your interviews. Maybe we'll start with where you started. Like, you were a kid, you played piano, your mom and you took lessons together. Mm-hmm. What music were you listening to? How did this all start?
Well, whatever was on. My folks had, back then, they had a pretty expensive record collection, and that's where I first would have fallen in love with Cockburn and Joni, and my dad was a big Springsteen guy. My mom started to get into ABBA in the sort of early 80s, and that stuff seeped in. They were big Beatles fans, and they had quite a lot of records. Since before I was able to put a record on, there was just always music on, and it was a different time then. Obviously, in a different, I think music played a role in the household differently than I think it does now. And I've heard other people talk about it, but it was much more of an event. That was the activity per se. Like listening to a record was that's what you would do. It wasn't an accompaniment to something else, and that's fine too, because sometimes there'd be a record on while somebody's preparing dinner or something, and that's certainly the case today. But it's funny. I was having this conversation with my wife and about ADHD and stuff like that. And our engineer / producer Rats, we were in the studio last week, and we had the same conversation about how that seems to be more prevalent nowadays, or maybe it just was undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And Rats and I were both like, I think I have the opposite, where it's just I'm able to hyper focus on something for 12 hours at a time. And I was talking to my wife about it. She said, no, that's a form of ADHD. You got to read up on it. I was like, well, I haven't really read up on it. We were just sort of two guys in the studio talking, So yeah, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. I obviously have not done the research.
Yeah.
But I've always said, escapism, I guess, is the heart of it. Like, I just love that a piece of music can have the same effect on you as a story or as a movie or anything, where you can get outside and once I realized at a very young age that you can recreate that to some degree, and then it just became the not the sort of demystification of it, but just sort of figuring out how to get it even closer. Like I want access to those channels of escape and of whatever's out there. I want that. I want to figure out how do those bits work together? Like, what makes that so magical when I hear it? And now I'm playing it exactly the same with the piano, but it's not quite reverb. Ooh, and then I just stomp down on the sustain pedal and be like, oh, okay. Like, as soon as I could reach it, I just floored that thing. And it seemed to help. But I guess from that, and I don't know, that's a long answer to a very short question, but it's one of those things I could go on all day.
Yeah, I was going to say probably not even long enough. Like,
Yeah.
and we need to start somewhere, because I'm loath to, be the guy who's in a position to interview somebody else to say, well, we're a lot alike but there are some similarities.
Yeah, for sure.
Insofar as I've been talking a lot to people who I really admire, and there's something about what I sort of can only call life, like being a lifer, that it's the life that chooses you, really not the life that you choose. And I feel like you have, in a couple of the interviews I've listened to you give, you express more or less that sentiment, that it wasn't like you were stroking your chin and deciding one day to become the guitar player in the rock band. That really, you got on that train at a young age and never got off. There was no decision to make. Like, this was the foregone conclusion that started at such a young age. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I tried to run away from it so in my sort of mid-teen years. But it not necessarily a guitar thing for me. It was just music. And yeah, like I
Well, it's a big responsibility that calls, right? I was the same. At 18, I was like, screw it. It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
When I listen to you, I hear somebody who's seems thoroughly dissatisfied with everything. Like, you don't get as good as you
Yeah.
if you just buy everything that comes out of yourself. Like, oh man, I'm wicked. Like, I get the sense that when I hear what you're capable of doing on the guitar and with your voice, that you're somebody who's locked in a perpetual search. Is that, am I right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it doesn't stop. And I don't think, I was just actually thinking about this, and because again, my wife she works in the industry somewhat, and an artist had come into her work yesterday or the day before, and it's somebody that we know, and it said something along the lines of, well, I only write as much music as is required for the album, and that kind of struck me, because I don't think that's possible for me. Like, I'm in the process of waiting for masters right now for the next EP that's coming out, and I'm already thinking on how I can, and I don't think that's, there's many ways to skin a cat, right? But and then there's no right or wrong, but just for me personally, I'm like, okay, I like this, but here's what I want more of next time, and here's what I want to learn how to do for the next time. And then the process of learning it usually can yield something else that sparks a creative idea, and before I know it, I'm writing something else that I never thought I would be writing, using different textures and different colors that I would never normally go towards. But yeah, it is, like you say, I think it's a sort of a search that never really stops. And the thought that I had was like, well, what if I only knew 4 chords? And what if my vocal range was only within a certain window? Would my songwriting all of a sudden become a lot more focused? Would my whole, whatever I do, would it just become a lot more honed in, where it's just like, well, I want to hit that high E over high C. I'm just going to sing that in the harmony and see what that does to the stack. And I'll just do it. And I think that in some ways can be in some ways it can pull focus from what the drive is, which should be the song, and sometimes it'll be, I feel like it can be a distraction, because I'll be able to play whatever I hear in my head, and I'll sing whatever I hear in my head, and then I'm like, wait a second, that's not the point here. The point is this song. And I think there's a lot to be said for like some of my favorite musicians and writers. or people that didn't really lean on, look what I can do kind of shit. It was more like, it was like a Joe Strummer. That's one of my favorite voices. Well, he's one of my favorite vocalists because it just sounds so honest and raw. And, I love him as much as Freddie, maybe not quite as much as Freddie Mercury, but I it's something about him that cuts right through me. And there's not a lot of operatic bel canto fucking technique going on. He's just here's what it is, take it or leave it. I don't have those kind of balls, but I try to always focus on cutting to the core of whatever it is that the song needs, and try to not have. Somebody I greatly respect said sometimes when I hear somebody playing fast and saying, look what I can do. And when they're playing slow, they're saying, here's who I am. And I always like, fast stuff is fun and tricks are fun. But they, even like the guys who started that whole thing with like Eddie Van Halen, there was something about him that it wasn't just about look what I can do. It was just like this whole thing was him. There was a rawness and an honesty and an authenticity to. So it's just like cutting all the bullshit out of what if we do this? What if we do that? What if we do this? Like, what does the song want? I don't know.
Yeah, the thing, I guess, I don't know your inner life and what your inner world and how you see yourself. I've imagined you for a long time because I was a fan of Big Wreck and the first record, and I was even a little bit adjacent to the making of it because I was pals with DeMatteo at the time and was snooping around presents when you guys weren't there. But like, I sort of feel like you're someone who has this extraordinary balance of like guttural brilliance and then the technical know-how. Like sometimes like the Joe Strummer, like he's a guttural genius on 3 chords. Somehow you've assembled a very brainy understanding of music, whether that was through your piano or whether that was through your time at Berklee. Like you can talk with technical know-how about creating stacks and what the third is over the C and trying that out. But at the end of the day, when I see you live or if I'm having a stoner night watching YouTube, and I routinely go to the performances you did at the Sur Factory for the company or whatever. Cool. They're brilliant recordings. Thanks. And I look at this guy and I go, well, this guy has got the stuff I love about music, which is he's done the work. When I hear you rattle off the complicated guitar stuff, I don't hear somebody wanking. I hear thoughtfulness in absolutely every note. Granted, I mean, beyond that too, Ian, like when I don't know all the records, but when I do see your band live, I'm entertained every bloody second because I'm interested in ideas. And I feel like the Ian Thornley machine is a fucking ideas artesian well. I even remember DeMatteo saying years ago, it's like, I'm in the studio with these guys and this guy just has so many ideas. What I realized flashing forward, even my wife who will say to me, like, you hate everything. What is it about music you actually like? And ultimately, if music has to fascinate, and I find very little music fascinates. Yeah. I can go to like, I go to Sting, which I know is not cool to say out loud, but
I love it.
It's an abundance of ideas. Give me the ideas as well as the musicianship. Then I get to hear the ideas of Vinnie Colaiuta. I get to hear the ideas of Dominic Miller. I get to hear these ideas. Yeah. When I'm treated to, and I was listening to the new EP, and it's just more. It's a hot blast of phenomenal ideas. It's the reason why I love.
Are you talking like the brand new one that we're waiting on the mastering?
The brand new one.
Oh, nice.
The brand new one, yeah. Good. And it's like, I mean, this is the thing is that the 21st century, I find myself sounding awfully old when I grump about how great things used to be. And a joke I always tell, I tell it on stage, and I've told in this podcast about how many folk singers does it take to screw in a light bulb? 1 to screw in the light bulb, and 3 to sing in harmony about how they like the old light bulb better. Yeah. And that's my natural resting position. Yeah. But there is something about the way you make music. The ethos comes from a bygone era. Am I wrong?
No, I totally agree. Yeah,
like you clearly value old thinking.
Yeah, and I did like my simplification of that whole thing was like, well, I just pray to a different God than I don't. I try not to shit on other musicians who do things differently than I do, or their goal or their aim is different and even if it's not an artistic one, because it seems like the balance of ambition and talent is just grossly. And then when you see or hear someone who is talented and has put in the work, because you can be marginally talented nowadays and get away with it. Like you don't really need to know how to sing. You don't really need to know how to play. You don't need to know how to write. You can do everything. You don't. It's just like, and it's like who's got an idea, and that's it. It's done. It's done for you. And if you have the right amount of ambition and you're good in the room, as they say, and you can sort of schmooze and do that whole fucking thing. I've never been good at it. And I know it's like I've got more yesterdays than tomorrows at this point. There's no way I'm ever going to be a good schmoozer. And I don't really care about that. I care about what's coming through the two speakers. That's my whole goal. And, when I'm long gone, at least I think people will be able to say, like, well, the work was good, and it put in the time. I didn't rest on any laurels or anything like that, and I'm still pushing. So I appreciate everything you're saying. That's really great. And, I'm going to need to go upstairs and get yelled at for a little bit so I can come back
Ian,
down.
well, there's more of that coming. I was a Weckl kid. I'm a drummer first,
Oh, nice.
and so I was a Weckl kid, and my side hustles were to try to become Frank and Ballet or some of these guys. Sometimes when I hear the way you rattle off complicated guitar phrases, I wonder how much 80s fusion you were listening to, because I remember when Alan Holdsworth died, I noticed you tweeted, and it was one of those deaths that went a little under the radar, but was one that I felt pretty close. And It was interesting that, so knowing that there was some connection to a fusion era guitar style, I hear that in what you're able to pull off on stage. Who is that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's my own sort of ham-fisted version. I mean, there were guys that I went to school with who lived and breathed that shit. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out "Deer Dancing Around a Broken Mirror" by Bruce Cockburn on drop tune finger style. That these guys were fitting in whole tone scales with altered scales and doing this to land on that chord, and weaving their way through weird, complicated, what seemed to me at the time arbitrary changes. That they're just like, that chord's just there because they could,
Yeah, right.
And I kind of rebelled against that for a long time, the sort of outsideness, and then it just sort of seeped in. It was like a cat that keeps coming to your back door, and you eventually put out a tiny saucer of milk, and then and I still I'm no Scott Henderson or guys who really this is their home base is already out there. And I think he comes a lot from the Holdsworth school as well. But I just kind of I'll borrow an idea that I think I could fit into my own tiny lexicon of both of my licks. I'll try to add flavors and things, but it's generally for me it's generally a way to get back to home base. When I'm throwing in outside stuff, I don't stay out in the skinny branches for too long, like some of the pros can do it. Some of the real guys, like the Julian Lage is another one that I'm just terrified and fascinated by, and he's more of a straight ahead cat. But as far as the '80s thing, it was such a time that I totally missed it at that time. I was a keyboard guy, and then when I started playing guitar, I was an acoustic guy. I was a Coburn disciple. That was it. And then I slowly got into like Stevie Ray and Mark Knopfler, and then Jimmy Page and all this. And then I got into Eric Johnson and Steve Morse, and my sort of the lick that I know how to play started to grow a little longer. And I think I just find so much with an era where people are just doing this, And some of it is about Guitar Olympics and just sort of like, doing the 4-minute mile on the fretboard and okay, well, I can do it in 3 minutes, and how much of it is. But then when you get every once in a while, you hear somebody that is so unique and so instantly identifiable within that. And Holdsworth is one of those guys. Like and I've said this before to other bandmates. I'm like, that's someone who it would take me a whole nother lifetime to never sound like that. Of just playing like that stuff, and I would still never sound the way Holdsworth does. And truth be told, I can only take so much of that.
Sure.
That music. I'm good for a tune or two, and then it's like, okay, it's just because it's a lot of focus following him around.
I think that, you said that you borrowed. Look, if Ian Thornley is going to borrow My Sugar, like, we know that it's going to be beautifully represented in whatever the outcome that you create for it. So, like, I was thinking, because in one of the interviews you said, you very humbly said that you wear your influences on your sleeve. And I'll say that's obvious in a way, like, yes. But the thing with Big Wreck is it never ambles anywhere near pastiche like a Greta Van Fleet might sort of appear to sort of have more than borrowed but taken. Like, the filter that you're going to bring what you borrow from is going to have all this extraordinary respect, the myriad of interesting musical influences, not to mention that you've done the 10,000 plus hours of work where, like, if Ian Thornley is going to borrow your thing, it's going to reappear as something extraordinarily elevated, not just some pastiche garbage thing that you're going to toss off with disrespect. And I feel like the Zeppelin thing is big. I'd love to talk more about Coburn because he's absolutely massive to me as well. I'm all over the map here. The Coburn thing, I must also say, he's the lyrical master for me, and I know you're a guy who pores over lyrics too. And when you are as good as you are, when your vocals are so phenomenal, the guitar playing is so phenomenal, the riffs are so phenomenal, we sometimes run out of air to finish the sentence, which is, and fuck, this dude's lyrics are exceptional. Like,
thank you.
And I think if you come up under the school of Coburn, you come up under the school of a guy who is...
It better mean something.
It's gotta mean something. Because if that was what you cut your teeth on, meaningful music, and to me, when I did my put music down at 18, it was because I'm not going to be Coburn. I can't be this good. Like, so if you're not going to be Coburn, then I don't want to play the game. Like, so I didn't ask any questions, but anything in there you feel like chatting about?
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know, lyrics are a hard thing. And I've talked about this 1,000 times. Like generally, not as a rule, but generally when I'm writing, it comes from the guitar first. Something will pour out, and I'll be like, okay, well, that's interesting. That, and sometimes a line the melody will present itself, and the line will present itself, and then I write from the inside out. And sometimes I'll have a very completed piece of music that has a beginning, middle, and an end, and an arc, and it's all there, and I have no fucking idea I don't know what this is about. And then sometimes it's just like I don't even need the line. I just need the door to open, just a crack. Like, here's what that song's about, and then I'm off to the races, and then I write, and I'll improve and throw that out, and I'll do that whole thing. But generally, it comes from the music and the melody, and I kind of know where the voice would sound best, and then I can adjust the melody this way, and I can. What if I went more with a Lennon kind of melody and just sort of, and then the ideas start to, and then something will pop out while you're scatting along. You're like, that resonates. Like, there's an idea there. And then it's just about sort of, the archaeology and sort of moving the dust away and seeing what's under there. And sometimes not on this record, but on most of the records I've done, there's always one or two or I've rewritten the song 4 or 5 times because I've got, okay, here's the idea, and I do it, and I draft after draft, and I'm like, okay, it fits, it sounds good, it's there. And then when I hear it as a whole, I'm like, that's not it. That's not it. Okay, here's the other idea that I kind of flirted with. Maybe that was the one, you know. And you end up kind of marrying whatever you think the strongest idea with the lyric that sounds the best. For me, I can hear those on my songs that I've written. I can hear the ones that I'm like, like Tom Petty said, when they all come in on the same bus, that's, that's kind of the songs that just land in your lap. It's like the whole thing is you've written it in your head before you're even able to play it. It's already there. It's like, this is great. And those are usually the ones that cut the deepest for you as a writer. But I think as far as it always having to mean something, I never read the fucking comments, but I read the comments on something years ago, and for some reason this fucking comment stuck with me, and it really pissed me off, because I was being asked at a radio station about some song or the lyrics or and I said I don't really like to talk about what the song's actually about, and I like to let the listener interpret it for themselves, because I don't want to take that meaning away from. Like, this guy's so full of shit. Why doesn't he just admit that he doesn't know what the song's about either, and he just wrote a bunch of fucking words? I'm like, and this is one of the more meaningful songs to me. That was like a really like, I didn't tell the guys in the band what it was about, and it's like I'll have certain little things within the lyric that are like their actual physical, like this little screwdriver, and that there's certain images and there's certain things that I'll leave for myself as a little Easter egg, just to make sure that I'm still present and it's not just a bunch of fucking words. Like, to me, that's very important. And I think that, I've always sort of felt that way. It can't just be a bunch of goofy words. And sometimes it is, and it's fun. Like the oath. There's no real words in that one, And it doesn't really need it, because it's like, yay, and then it's over. But I'm okay with that too. Sometimes a song just needs to be, a little bit of, sunshine, ice cold beers in a can kind of song, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But when the ones that I'm sort of proud of, and the ones that I can get into a deeper level in a live situation, is because there are those little signposts and those little things that keep me present to the moment when I wrote it and what I was writing about. Regardless of if it's something that happened to me that was a personal thing, that was, was trauma or whatever the fuck. If it's something that is within my sort of attention span enough that I need to write about it, then I need to remind myself why, And it's like, I think that probably comes from the sort of Springsteens and the Coburns and the guys who are way better at wordplay than I am, and way better at, even Sting, just so much better at just conveying the message and, just getting the idea out in a really beautiful and interesting way. And it's probably a big dash of Gordon Downey thrown in there as well, because I just loved his style of almost out of that sort of Michael Stipe, where it's just a line that comes out of nowhere, and it smacks you with the most delicate velvet glove, and you're like, wow, that's a good line. I have no idea what it means, but I love the way those words go together. If I'm lucky enough to trip over one of those kind of lines, I'm going to throw it in the song. So we'll see.
Well, when you played in Peterborough a few weeks ago, I watched an entire audience melt to that song, and really, like, you put it very early in the set, and it was kind of that way to, get the audience on side. But it hit me. The local indie rock radio station, which I love, plays a lot of big rec. So I hear that song quite a bit. And, Coburn, Lovers in a Dangerous Time, Rumors of Glory. Like this guy could write
Yeah.
like a hook, like a title that sort of had this like infinity attached to it. When I saw you sing that song and everybody, like there was a lot of people too. It's like fucking felt like 5 or 10,000 people came out to it was a big
I think
night.
it was 12 and a half.
Was it 12 and a half? It was awesome. So great to hear. And but that song really hit me because I was like, okay, not only does this guy get to get up on stage being this guitar guy, being this extraordinary vocalist, but you get to bring a song that's going to hit people right in the gut, in the feels. And all of a sudden, like, Ian Thornley doesn't need to be the great guitar player in a way. He doesn't need to be this incredible singer with 3-4 range octave range. Like you brought out and sang something to me that sort of has that Coburn-esque crystallized vocal
Yeah,
idea.
I think
I
that's-
really love that song. I really love that tune. And it's just like, shit, this dude, it's a very, you contain a very dynamic picture as an songwriting artist, that you have that song that has that heft, that it's going to deliver that emotional punch. That's cool, isn't it?
I mean, that's what the aim is for me, and always has been, honestly. And the vocal thing is something I came at because we had tried out singers upon singers in the early days because I didn't want to be the singer.
Yeah, this is crazy.
That came to me later. And
You didn't know that voice lived in you, Ian. I have a really hard time believing that.
No, man, it's not. There's a stigma attached to being a front. You know what I'm going to say? What we say in the biz, front something, but front guy.
Yeah.
And there's a stigma attached to that, and it's like, early on, I was asked about that. I was like, yeah, I'd be trying out singers all the time. Like I'll do the lion's share of the writing, and then we'll find somebody who can really sing and really hold an audience and do all that shit. And it's just I'd always wanted to be more of a writer, you know. And something like, I think that song, it's like that's just one of those lucky things where the two things, you know, kind of both had a little stardust on them, you know, the lyric and the idea, and on the fact that it's based on a true story and a real thing that happened to me, and I think that enables me to sort of connect to it. Every night that we play it, it's still not muscle memory shit for me. I'm still like, I still love all those tunes. But yeah, there's something about being lucky enough to have one of those songs land, and that to me is the goal. You know, that's always been the focus. The rest of it is just window dressing. You know. Yeah, the real thrust, I think, should be the song and something that can, you know, grab people.
Somewhere along the line, in my opinion, like, it's clear you're tuned to excellence or tuned to greatness. Somewhere along the line, like, where does this come from? Was there a work ethic in your family? There's a lot of good singers and good guitar players, but to take things up to the notch where you exist, like, there's an obsessive character behind that kind of a person. There's also somebody that we'd already discussed being dissatisfied. Like, and then there's just knowing that you can play runs with flawless tempo, which you do. Like, lots of guitar players are fast, but not necessarily, their timing isn't hot. Okay. Your timing is hot. So, like, when does Ian Thornley, as a kid, wake up to the fact that you are an obsessive who can't deal with less than great? Like, am I onto this thing?
I don't know. I just, when it came to music, I never really, you know, I did much later. But when it came to music, I was never really like, oh, I can't do that. You know, I just never had that. I can do that if I just, you know, I gotta sit down with it for a couple of weeks, and I'll have that under my fingers. It was always that kind of thing. But I mean,
how many hours a day are we talking?
When I was a kid,
yeah.
When I was a kid, it would fluctuate, but I would get lost in, you know, I would the classic um, have a curriculum of things that I had to learn for the next week's lesson, and I would just I would ear haul it. Like, I would just remember from the, and when I would sit down, depending on if my parents were really dialed into what I was doing, I wasn't practicing what they wanted me to. I wasn't doing the crossover scales, and I was just doing my best Keith Jarrett impersonation and just going off and just seeing what I could find, and getting lost in some idea. So early on, I was more fascinated with hypnotizing myself into something and that could go on for hours and hours. But as far as like sitting down and doing this shit for hours and hours and hours, you don't have that much. At least I'm not one of those people who can do that for that long, because it starts to feel like work. But I'll take a run that I've ripped from somebody, and I'll work on that, slower tempos, and then go over the tempo that I need it at. I still do that to this day. And I think with age, it's like, okay, now I'm at the point where it's like I'll hear certain people do certain things, and I'm like, okay, I'll never be able to do that. But, what I can sort of glean from that is, and then I also just sort of try to absorb some of that vibe. But especially in this game, there's not a lot of, the guys I know who are real players, they don't have to worry about this shit. They're players, and I have the greatest of respect for them, and just beautiful players, not just guys, but you know what I mean, like this sort of thoroughbred,
I do.
like that. Yep. And I, when I'm putting a record together and we're doing the thing, like, my chops kind of, like, I'm sitting at the desk, like running stuff, because it's like I can feel the concrete starting to, go to the bathroom and start doing some lip rolls to make sure I'm stretching stuff out, because the rest of the focus is on the entire presentation and whether or not I can have that feeling that reaches out and grabs somebody, even somebody that's not looking to be grabbed. That's the ultimate. Like, what is that? And then, but like I said, with age, I gotta sort of take on a little more discipline with practicing and being honest with yourself. Like, what do I need to practice? You need to set that tempo slow and play quarter notes perfectly. Can you do that? All upstrokes. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you're talking my language, like, and the idea of like that, the player that you're talking about. Again, like, I, as a kid, was chasing after I wanted to be like the great session player. So I do understand about those regimes and the difference in some ways between like the rock musician and the player. You're that pure player you're talking about. I still don't see you as being separate from that concept personally, because I mean, I feel like you embody. You're on the inside of your own insecurities. I mean, from the outside, I put in the 10,000 hours as well. I think in some ways when I look at you, I see the guy who actually did 10,000 more hours. Like, by the time I was 18, I was pretty sharp as a drummer.
Yeah.
But also then I also wanted to be a guitar player. I wanted to be a really great lyricist, singer, songwriter. Like, stuff started to splinter off, and I couldn't then keep my focus, which is fine. Like, I'm still excellent. This aging thing you're talking about, and the fingers and the lip trills and the joints becoming concrete, is a very big thing. I also realized, like, when I was in my 20s, I could get up on stage and feel like I could dazzle effortlessly. My fingers were right there and ready. That's not the case anymore. I'll also tell you this story. About 15 years ago, I was playing the Edmonton Folk Festival, and I was wandering back to my hotel room. There was a door open, familiar guitar sound coming through the crack in the door. And it's Bruce.
Nice.
Bruce is, I guess he's in his mid-70s now, so he would have been 60 then. And I kind of poke my head in, and we're kind of buddies. He knows I'm a mega fan. I always say stupid stuff to him.
Yeah. I'm the same.
And yeah, it's ridiculous. And he says, "Oh yeah, like I have to practice a couple hours a day now because I'm the guitar guy. People come to see the flashy playing. If I can't deliver that, the audience leaves disappointed." And he's like, "I just can't pick the guitar up anymore and play that shit I played so easily when I was younger." So he's busy maintaining the Coburn mythology through hard work.
Yeah.
Like you
That's
must
the
be
job.
seeing that coming. That's the job, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I do when we're on the road, I my sort of practice or whatever warm up regimen will get very focused on depending on the set sometimes. Like if I need to hit 16th note triplets at 136, I'm trying to go to 138, 139, which for me 16th note triplets at 138, 139, even 140. We have a song where there's, but thankfully it's just on one string. It's like, but that's it, And then I'll do that one at 142, 143. And just to make sure, and I'll try to do it loose. Like I've got this new thing where it's my elbow. I'm like, what's happening? But I just got to make sure that I can do it loose and do it easy. And then with the vocals, it's the same thing. I'll gently stretch shit out until I can go well past where I need to, just to make the other parts that much more, almost like it was when I was a kid. Just make it. It'll just come and it'll happen. I do think that's for me. That's part of the job. A guitar solo isn't the focus for me on a recording. Like as you heard from that EP, there's one solo on that first EP. We recorded a lot. Like there's a lot of noodling going on, but not this first EP so much. It's more, it's just a different thrust, a different focus. But it's never been the central thing for me. It's the guitar solo. Like if it fits, if it works, if it adds to the song, if it gives the song something else, then yes, I'm into it. But at the same time, it's something I take very, very seriously and something I work at all the time. If I'm not on the road, I don't come down here to my little beach shack and do vocal stuff. I'm working on guitar stuff, I'm working on things that I've been working on for however many years I've been doing it. Like just trying to get it cleaner, just trying to get it faster, just trying to get it perfect. And it's a different focus than I had when I was younger, because I think I just took it for granted. I used to play really heavy strings and, we were idiots back then. Like Big Wreck, we were idiots. And it was into all this sort of cheap bravado. It was bad. But it was there was something raw and honest and great about it, because it was just saying, hey, chicken, this sort of peacocking every night. But that's the kind of thing that's you're headed straight for a wall or a burnout or something. So I think it would eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and my focus just became a lot more detailed. It wasn't just like, yeah, I feel great, let's go rock. Now I'm like, no, I have things that I need to hit. I have, it's almost like my own little like meditation, if you will. Like just knowing that, okay, I got that, put that away, got that, put that away. I'm ready, and I never was like that when I was young. I was thinking to go on stage feeling the same way I did the night before and come off and be like, why was that so terrible? And not have any idea. That was terrible. No idea why. That audience sucked. Of course, it's never your fault, right? It's like, well, remember, like some people say, hey, maybe you should try warming up. I'm like, what do you mean? So I play guitar all day. It's like, no, that's not really it. It's about, sort of
it's honestly
the task at hand.
It makes me happy to hear this, Ian. Like when I am having my stoner nights with you guys and playing the Sir Factory, I'm like, how did this guy get here? Again, like, because I did the big push on the drums. Like I kind of know what it looks like to get to that place, and I know what it would look like to have gone past that place. What am I driving at here? I'm driving at. It's the job. You've taken the job seriously. Somehow, as you've gotten older, you've gotten better. I am interested on stage now singing in tune. And I remember going on a bit of a YouTube search thinking like, man, Sting's got great pitch. Did he come to the was he fully formed? And then, of course, I went back to listen to Old Police, and he didn't sing in tune. Yeah. He was just a drunk idiot, like we all were drunk idiots, shouting into a microphone. Yeah. And
that you couldn't hear, right?
You couldn't hear.
Monitor pointed at your knees.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, God, thank God. Okay, so Sting is actually, now he sings impeccably in tune. So I feel like these people who are these lifers, who are in a relationship to music and their own performance that is ongoing, it's long-lasting. Oh. I don't see Ian Thornley like letting his foot up off the gas. I see Ian Thornley demanding more of himself. Like, to me, this is a kind of madness that I think if you were like a fan of rock music, like you see a life of, I don't know, Ian Thornley should be at home sipping drinks and enjoying the fruits of being the greatest guitar player in the country, and not, oh, you mean Ian Thornley is at home practicing his vocals and making sure that he can play triplets at 139 BPM? Like, it makes my heart swell with gladness because I look at Ian Thornley and Big Rec and I think, what a lonely world to live in Canada. Like, you are such an... You must look out at the landscape and go, like, for every song on the radio that has 2 good ideas and your songs have 52 good ideas, like, again, like, I'm one of those people who sees music in some ways like a sport. And maybe I know you come from athletics too. And for me, like, the meritocratic universe of somebody who can run faster or lift heavier is exciting to me. Like, even within the context of music, like, it's, and I say to people sometimes, like, a live musical show requires a feat of strength. If there's no feat of strength, it's not a show. Yeah. Like, you can have great songs, like Coburn, without the feat of strength, is still singing great songs, but we want him to play those complicated sort of oblong passages on an open tune guitar. Like, the feat of strength is a big part of why the whole thing.
What sets somebody apart, right? I think that's part of it. It's like, why is this fucking person special? You know?
And I find myself asking that a lot about everything. But when I look at you on stage, I'm like, well, this is what I said early on. It's personified. That's the thing. When I listen to Zappa, it's the same thing. It's like, sometimes I just need to listen to somebody that is truly great. Like, I just need to listen to something that's truly great. And I don't want to, I don't need to apologize for it, but like that.
No, I'm with you on that, man. And I thank you for saying all that. And I'd be such a dick if I was like, yeah, well, that's what. But at the same time, it does touch on something that we've been discussing for a while now, sort of on the tour bus kind of thing. Like, what the fuck happened? Why is it like? Why aren't you the only people that are truly amazing anymore are the people who were amazing already fucking 40 years ago? You want to hear a real vocalist, go watch Steven Tyler do his thing at 70 years old and it's still like, oh my goodness. Go watch Sting, go see like those. I don't know what happened, but it's like there's nothing extraordinary anymore. That's what it seems to me. Like, it's good song. I can tell that 9 people wrote it. There's nothing, it's like, well, here's an idea that I have that I came up with, and it's coming through me and all my influences on all the work that I put in. And even if it's not my jam, if it's not my style of music, I'll hear that. And I'll say, holy shit. We saw, oh God, what was his name? It's a very famous sort of country dude, big beard, long hair, unbelievable voice.
Oh, Chris Stapleton.
Chris Stapleton. I went and saw him a couple weeks ago, and my jaw was on the floor. I left there saying, there you go. That guy wasn't jumping around doing anything, but he stood on that stage, opened his mouth, and changed people. The molecules in the air were different when he sang a note. It was just unbelievable. I was like, that's the best guy doing it right now, I think. This sort of, like, he's probably in his 40s. I don't know. He's just this generation. I was like, I just couldn't believe it. And the songs for me were like, stylistically, I'm like, oh, okay, it's good. It wasn't like it didn't hit me like a ton of bricks. The songwriting, there's a couple of them where I'm like, okay, that's good. But his singing, like just the performance of it, and his mastery of just control and when he can go for it, and like there's no way he just nailed that. Holy shit, the way he came off that one. It just never stops wowing you. And it just really hit home for me. It's like, well, that's why I'm out here watching that guy under the lights on stage. It's because he's exceptional. You know, when did it become cool to not be exceptional in what you do? That seemed to be like when we were coming up, when Big Rec was coming up, there's all these fucking bands of guys who were shucking oysters 3 months ago and just learned how to play, you just tune the low string down and do this. And the singer was like, just do the thing, and then you're good, It's a song. It's great. It's going to be on the radio. Like, when did that become okay? Where's the work? What makes you exceptional? It's like, well, it's not cool to be exceptional. I just want to be like, Joe from down the street. I get that, too. I'm not saying we all have to walk down the street and be like Rod Stewart or Freddie Mercury, but, I'm certainly not one of those guys. I'm just a normal dude, and I'm off stage. I'm pretty shy. I'm pretty shy on fucking stage. But at the same time, I'm obsessed with putting the work in and getting further, going further, growing, searching, getting better. I'm obsessed with that. And it pisses me off. I'm sure it pisses you off too. It's like, listen to these people. This is bullshit. And they're selling like crazy. And people are out there buying it, going, this is great. Kind of sounds like Zeppelin. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, talk about, like, just sort of missing the entire, But anyway, that's a bit of a rant. I'm sorry. I haven't eaten yet. I haven't eaten yet.
Okay, well, we're
over
caffeinated shortly, and then you can eat. Yeah, I'm over caffeinated too. Everything you're saying really resonates. Really, really resonates. I would like to put this to you, because this to me is like the piece of the guitar virtuoso puzzle, and just in terms of the excellence puzzle, we'll say. So somehow I follow a lot of kids on Instagram who are ridiculous guitar players. They're phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like it feels like the abundance of virtuosity has never been higher. Yeah. But it also feels like the world couldn't care less about guitar. Like, this is what I can't figure out. Like, I'm looking at these kids who, thanks to the internet, because you and I had to rip stuff by ear off of albums. We didn't really get to see people play stuff. Now you can watch 20 different people tell you this is how to play the solo from Sultans of Swing.
Yeah, and here's what it should feel like. They'll tell you
exactly.
Everything. Yeah.
So, like, it's clear virtuosity exists. Kids have not stopped practicing, but it feels like musicianship is something for Instagram. Like, it's not in music anymore. Like, do you have any thoughts about this?
Not really. I mean, I get.
Are you noticing that though?
Yeah. And I kind of like slowed down on my whole Instagramming my guitar stuff, because I went through a good long stretch there. I was just sort of posting all the time and like little snippets of a whittly.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, I kind of did it. That's And there's so many people like, dude, you need to post more. And I'm like, but I did. Like, if I come up with something cool, I want to save it for the record, that kind of thing.
The internet's hungry, Ian. The internet's hungry.
I know. I will. Once I get my setup down here a little better.
We want your table scraps, Ian. It's like, we'll take whatever you're not using. We just want to see it.
I get it. And as far as the kids, and like, I think, there are a lot of guys that I like, and girls, but mostly guys. Let's be honest. When it comes to guitar nerds, they're mostly dudes. There's some great women players out there that come along the last few years. But most of them that I know who are at that sort of next level of and I'll use the word virtuosity, like just stunning players. Those are people who have sort of done a hybrid approach of that. You start off by ear hauling it, like you're lifting everything old school. And there's a way to really ingest and digest that as a player when you're doing it that way. Because you might have it wrong, You might be playing it in the wrong position on the wrong set of strings. There is a lot that comes with that. And that's part of the 10,000 hours. Some of these kids haven't been alive for 10,000 hours, and they're just mind-blowingly, just perfect and effortless. Like, where's, the guy's not even trying. Like, there's some really young kid with Coke bottle glasses and sort of a weird puffy mullet. He's unbelievable. Yeah. And he's like looking around the room like, and just burning. But it's tasty burning. Like, it's really good. Yep. I'm like, that's freaky. And I'm like, this guy's fake. And I can usually spot the ones that are faking it. He's not faking it. He's actually doing that. I'm like, who is this guy? Has he written anything?
Well, this is just it, isn't it?
What's his band like? It's just a different. It's a different thrust. It's a different time. It's like, what's the fascination? 100%. This, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful. I'm not disputing that, but it's great in 45-second increments. It's just like, whoa, that was awesome. Yeah. Oh my God, have you seen this latest? It's just you're on to the next thing.
But show me, did you write that song? Like, literally, you're that. So it's 100%. It's actually it's a very astute way of looking at it. Where I should probably be done with you, but let's just quickly just talk about the magic of Zeppelin. Like, for me, I think I skipped from Michael Jackson to Led Zeppelin, and then the obsession with Led Zeppelin and John Bonham, and my sort of embodying John Bonham. And every time I listen to Zeppelin, still, I realize I'm back in school feeling as excited as I was on the first day. Like, to me, Zeppelin is this. It's a roadmap. It's a spiritual talisman. It's so much. And you, for some reason, of anybody who uses Zeppelin as a touchstone, filters it with respect, with additional, you somehow add power to it as opposed to taking away. The thing is, when you try to, even like, I come from the drum universe, and everybody, here's me doing a Bonham thing. Yeah. It's like, nobody does the Bonham thing. Can we just fucking agree?
Can't do it.
One guy did the Bonham thing, and that was Bonham, and we're all attempting it.
Can't be done.
So it can't be done. So, in some ways, the virtuosity of Jimmy Page is a so what until we're confronted with Achilles' Last Stand or something like that, where it's like, holy fuck, like this contains infinity ideas. Yeah. So, I mean, what is so lasting about this band? What is it that's infused in there that is so bloody eternal?
I don't know. I mean, it's a tough one to say because I can still go back to it. It's not something I get sick of.
Same.
I can look past some of the silly lyrics here and there because the vocal performance is just so breathtaking that I don't care what he's saying. But listen to how he's saying it, And then, I don't know. For me, it's probably part and parcel. I was a big Supertramp guy, too. And I go back to those records. There's 3 or 4 of those records that are just perfect. But there, I think it was a time for me. Pink Floyd. Like, when I started listening to all these artists and bands around the same time, and it was at a time when, for me personally, I needed something. Nothing against Duran Duran. I loved that stuff when I was, but it was just beyond that age. I was about 13, 14, 15, and I needed, and these records, these bands spoke to me in a way that, they tickled my nerd nerve. There was a mystique, a real mystique, a tangible mystique that was with all of them. Maybe not so much with Supertramp. Those guys were a little more, we're musicians, we're making music. But with Zeppelin, there was all the, and it really grabbed a hold of me at that age. And I tried peeling back all those layers for a long time. Like, what is it and why? And I don't really know what it is. Like, everybody on their own is magical. They're great. But them as a unit going for it, I don't think, some of those records I don't think are ever going to be touched. And as far as the Bonzo thing, like, it's, you can use that as a reference, and that's about it. I don't think I've never heard anybody come Well, I do, but I've listened so intimately to all those things that I can hear when it's just like, well, no, we're going to borrow a bit of that room sound and throw it through a compacts. Let's just call it our Bonzo sound. But it's the way to me, it was just the way he self-mixed his own. The kit sounded like an instrument already. The hi-hats were perfectly EQ'd with the kick and the snare before they even put a mic up, just by the way he touched them, the way he hit them. All came from just the way I look at it, all came from the kick up. Like that kick was so perfectly played on every beat. But yeah, I don't really know the way it was engineered, the way it was recorded, but there has to be something. They just were tuned to a different channel then, and they were going for different things, and like they were surrounded by the right people, and they were, as opposed to being like, yeah, I wouldn't do that, man. That's not going to sell. They were somehow lucky enough to be thrust into like, what else can you do? What else you got? And then they all had deep, deep pockets that they could just keep going further and further and further, and just to see what they're capable of, just to see what they can come up with. And came up with some beautiful shit, some of those. Yeah. I feel that way about that era too, like those Genesis records and Yes records, they're all very important to me. And I think because of that, because there was like I said, with the 80s, when it was like this kind of thing, with guitar players, I think in the 70s it was like that with records and with albums and with ideas and just seeing how far you can take stuff. And I think the ones who did it the best for me are the ones who pushed it as far as it could go, but they never took their one foot off the Beatles, of a great hook and a great melody and the idea that the melody is king. It's like once it's just like, thrown in spazzy chords because they got numbers in them. Okay, you've lost me. Like I still need something to carry me through. And some of the 70s prog bands, they and just my opinion, sitting here in 2023, and they kind of lost the plot a little bit. They got a little carried away. It's okay. That's there just because. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, everything with Zeppelin always sounded like there was a meaning behind it. And the more you dissect it, it's like. Sometimes there's not as much there, and they were just doing it. But sometimes when you dissect things, it's like you can really see an artist at work putting little pieces together. And for the four members, I mean, I don't know. It's hard though. Yeah. It's hard to put your finger on.
Well, Ian, look, I think you're quite a great mind and the full package artist. Maybe you'll come back on again and we can talk more, because I feel like we're just getting started about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, man.
Because nerding out and talking about this kind of stuff is absolutely big for me. So we'll say this. We'll say Ian Thornley to be continued at a later date, but thank you for the last hour and your generosity and talking about this stuff. I'm a big fan. So
thanks, man. I'm a fan of yours too. I really appreciate it.
The Stumble Forward is an Isadora Media production and is hosted by Hawksley Workman and produced by Jennifer Kavanaugh. Be sure to subscribe and follow The Stumble Forward. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/Hawksley Workman. Thank you for listening.
Stumble forward, the stumble forward.